In July and August 2024, the best male gymnasts on the planet will compete for 8 gold medals at the Paris Olympic Games. The top 8 teams, 24 all-arounders, and 8 individual specialists on each apparatus will battle it out for Olympic glory. In this episode, I'm going to predict my top 3 on each gold medal event. I'm going to talk about what it's like to compete at the biggest show on earth, and I'm going to share my big takeaways from the brand new Simone Biles documentary on Netflix after watching it this past weekend. And this is my story. So today I'm going to go through my top 3 predictions for the Paris Olympic Games. We're a week away. I'm super excited. I can't wait to watch it. I know that the gymnastics community is very, very excited. We get this chance once every 4 years to be one of the biggest sports, I guess, in the world. It helps having an icon like Simone Biles going into the Olympic Games. That brings a lot of media attention. You know, the vast majority of that is going to be on her, but that, you know, you like to think that that kind of trickles down to everybody else as well. And it's a great opportunity for the sport to showcase itself, particularly in this country. You know, we've been so successful since 2012, and I guess that first medal that Lewis won in 2008, they're definitely in the UK. Lots of people enjoy watching the Olympics now. Enjoy watching the gymnastics at the Olympics now. So I'm going to go through my top 3. I'm going to start with the team event. In the team event, I think for me, my favourites, after looking at all of the teams, all 12 teams have now been selected. I've recently done some podcast episodes with Magnastics and Neutral Deductions, 2 social media channels that focus on men's gymnastics, and we went through the Olympic trials for most of the big teams, and I think Japan are still my favourites. They've got the strongest team. Neutral Deductions, Kensley, she did a very good breakdown of the top 5 teams, the start values and the lineups that they're most likely to use in the team final, and I think that they have the edge. The Japanese team, I think they've got the highest difficulty. I think China have a couple of weak spots, whereas for Japan, they're very well balanced. I think on pommel horse, they have an incredibly high difficulty with all 3 of their routines. Same on floor, and China just seem to look like they've got a few weaknesses. Now, we don't know whether they might upgrade some of those routines and what their 3 up 3 to count lineup might be. The team that China have picked, it is kind of very specialist dominant. So they're going to have some gymnasts that might put up weak scores in the qualification event, because the qualification event at the Olympic Games will be 5 in the team, 4 scores go up and 3 scores count. So they're either going to have a weak 4th score on some of the apparatus, or they might only put 3 athletes up. And the way that they might do that, they might have their top 3 guys go up first, and if they do 3 good routines, the 4th guy might not need to go up. So it'll be interesting to see how they play qualification, the Chinese team, because like I said, they've essentially picked a specialist on rings, a specialist on a few apparatus in Zhu, the Chinese incredible Olympic champion on parallel bars. So yes, I think it's going to be interesting to see how China go about that qualification event, but Japan are my prediction to win the gold medal at the moment. I just think they've got too much depth. I think they've picked a lot of all-arounders. I think that comes down to the way in which they select their team, how rigorous it is, how all of those gymnasts have to essentially be all-arounders, and all of those gymnasts have competed on all-around in all of their trials. They had 4 trials, so I'm expecting them to do very, very well. I think in the past at times, Japan have at Olympic Games have struggled with the change of equipment. This is going to be the first time, right, that they've competed at an Olympic Games on different equipment. In Japan, it was on Seno, so they were competing on their own equipment, the Japanese equipment. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that first qualification event. I imagine they've probably been over in France for a good couple of weeks trying to get used to it. When I think back to the way they trained in the lead up to London, they were very relaxed actually in their build-up, because we trained with Japan before London. It was ourselves, the French team, and the Japanese team in our holding camp, which was in a gym called Arc in the north of France. That's where America are based at the moment. It's great seeing all of the Olympic team members from all the different teams, see where they're training, where their holding camps are. So they're in Arc, which is a beautiful gym in the north of France, and they were very relaxed. I remember thinking, wow, these guys aren't doing a lot of routines. They seem to be just laughing, falling a lot in a lot of their routines, and that kind of translated to their qualification event. They had a lot of falls in qualification. So yeah, I expect them to maybe have changed that approach since 2012. They've obviously gone on to be incredibly successful, 2016 and then 2020. what became 2021 in Tokyo. So, yeah, I think they're definitely the firm favourites for me. They're a much more well-balanced team. They don't really have many weak spots. I think their real strengths are high bar, vault, pommels. They look strong on floor as well. If they've got any weaknesses, it would probably be rings. Parallel bars, they're still incredibly strong on parallel bars, just maybe not quite as strong as the Chinese, because the Chinese just have that one routine with incredibly high difficulty. So I think in terms of the balance, and if anything can happen at an Olympic Games, right? You can have an injury, someone might get ill, there might be someone struggling with a certain piece of equipment, it could be anything. I think they've got the right balance of a team to cover anywhere, because they're ultimately all-arounders, those guys in that team. So I expect Japan to be the favourites for me. They've got the reigning all-around an Olympic champion. That has to make you, for me, that is a big thing and definitely puts you up there as being firm favourites. I think typically in an all-around final as well, it's not uncommon to have your country have the number one guy and also someone else on the podium. So I think that kind of like pulls you along a little bit. And they've got Oka Shinosuke. I've completely forgot his name there. So I'm sure in the comments, gymnastics fans are going to murder me. But I think he could be somebody fighting it out for that third place in the all-around. I think that's going to help, having two guys on the podium. I don't really think the Chinese will be able to do that. I think they'll have two guys that are contenders for top six, but maybe not for the podium. So I'm predicting that the Japanese team have just got too much all-around difficulty and they're too balanced for the Chinese. But you never know. I would expect potentially the Chinese to maybe struggle in qualification. They tend to do that at an Olympic Games and then pull it out in the team final. Very good with a free to count. I definitely think they're a team that benefit from that team final, just having three guys up. A bit similar to the Ukrainian team there. I feel like the Ukrainian team benefit from three guys up, three guys to count, because of the makeup of their team and the wide variety in ages, body types, builds, difficulty. So I think that the Chinese team are pretty solid for second place at the moment. I'd expect those two, Japan and China, to qualify 1 and 2 and to be starting on floor. The Olympic order, so the rotation of events is floor exercise, pommel horse, rings, vault, parallel bars, and the high bar. And it goes like this. You have a leg event, a support event, a hang event, and you go back to a leg event, a support event, a hang event. And so wherever you start in those 6 rotations, you move that way around. So if you start on vault, you go to P-bars, high bar, back to floor, pommels, rings, vault. If you start on pommel, you start pommels, go rings, vault, parallel bars, high bar, floor. So I expect those guys, Chinese and Japanese, to both be on floor, starting on floor. I think there's a big gap then between the battle for third place. It's very difficult to say. I think the team selections has swung it for me a little bit. Actually now, given the team that the Americans have picked and the British team, it's difficult to say, but I think they're closer. I would have put America as the favourites, a month ago, 6 weeks ago. But given the team that they've selected, the American team, and they've gone for another specialist on pommel horse, I'm not sure about it. Just doesn't fill me with tons of confidence in terms of what they're going to be able to do out there at the Olympic Games. I think they still got the upper hand. Kensley, Neutral Deductions, she did a very good article on, again, like I said at the start, the difficulties of the teams. I think Ukraine actually has the upper hand when it comes to difficulty by about a mark, and then it drops down to USA and then GB below that. Of course, you never know what difficulty is going to be performed on the day and whether any of the gymnasts are going to step that up. But I think out of the big difference between Ukraine, Great Britain and America and Japan and China is that those 3 teams have real obvious weaknesses in terms of difficulty on a few of the events. When I look at the Ukrainian team, at the moment, I think they massively benefit from the free up, free to count. I think they struggle putting up 4 scores in qualification, but free up, free to count, they're very, very strong. They've got a lot of experience in that team with Radovilov, Vanayev, Kovtun, and then they've got the kind of 2 younger athletes competing there, which I'm really excited to see. I think as a team, I've talked about them as being like a team of Avengers because physically, their body types are so different. They're such a varied team, quite exciting to watch. I think you're going to see different styled routines from all of those athletes there. So it'll be quite cool to see that makeup of the team. I think they're obviously parallel bars is going to be big for them. Massive start values. High bar, I think Covton certainly brings their weaker events up with his difficulty. He has very high difficulty. I think on high bar they look stronger because they've got Covton in the team. Looks like they'll be counting a weak score. They're probably going to put Vanayev up on high bar. I'm expecting like either a high 4 difficulty start value on high bar or a low 5s. Floor, again, maybe might have a weak score going up there on floor. Pommels look very strong, actually, on pommels. Rings will be okay, I think. Probably competitive with Great Britain and America. Vault will be pretty strong. I'm expecting 3, 5, 6s. So they'll be up there. But I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Ukraine qualify maybe 4th or 5th, but then step it up for the final. I think America, like I said, on the face of it, the team, I'm not quite sure. I don't know why I've got that feeling. But when you look at the numbers, they still look very strong and a bit more balanced. I think they are counting some low start values. So they have a low start value on pommels, but it's a very clean routine. I imagine that they're probably going to put Paul Judah up on pommels. So quite a low start value, but he does it incredibly clean. Lots of flares, not a lot of deductions in that routine. Rings, okay, again, kind of Great Britain, USA and Ukraine are very similar on rings. Vault, looks like they've got 252 volts. So that's where they might struggle. I think that maybe is where I'm thinking, I'm not quite sure, because the British team incredibly strong on vault right now. They're going to be putting up a 256, and I think Ukraine are putting up 356 volts. So America are going to have that 6 from Asher Hong, but I think they then drop to 252s, which, if you're going to have a lower start value on an apparatus as a team, you probably want it to be on an apparatus where there are the least amount of deductions. Vault and I'd say parallel bars are probably those 2 apparatus. Floor, high bar, pommels, rings, typically they're the apparatus where you get the biggest amount of deductions in your routine. So if you are going to have a lower difficulty score, you probably want the apparatus for that to be on as a team to be vault or parallel bars. So that might not play too much of a factor if they get close to sticking those 252s. Parallel bars, yeah, pretty similar again to the British team. Ukrainian team look the strongest on parallel bars, and then high bar, the Americans are pretty strong on high bar. I think they've got the edge on all 3 of those teams on high bar, so that's going to be a big event for them. I think it will massively depend on where those teams start. So out of those 3, if they are the 3rd, 4th and 5th team in qualification, 2 of them will probably start on pommels and 1 of them will start on rings. Now, I think the team that starts on rings, if it's not Great Britain, will be at a disadvantage because they'll know they're finishing on pommel. And if you're going into pommel with a current Olympic champion on your team, which GB will be doing if they start on rings because they'll have Max in the team, I think Great Britain look like the strongest team on pommel for me out of those teams. From what I've seen recently, and the videos I'm seeing online, Max looks like he's getting through pommel routines. I've been told he's getting through pommel routines, and I saw a clip of him training in the holding camp where they are at the moment, going through what looked like a routine. There was only clips from that routine, but given the way that people were cheering for him and kind of the feedback he was getting from the teammates and the people in the gym at the time, it sounded to me like that was a full routine that he'd gone through. So I think he's going to be in shape. It's strange to see Max wearing a wrist support because he never really wears wrist support, so that's an interesting thing. So he's obviously still struggling with that hand or that wrist on that side, but he looked good. So I think that's definitely going to, if I'm America or Ukraine, I'm hoping, I'm kind of crossing my fingers that Max isn't in good shape and he's not fit and he's not ready. It looks like he is. And he's also going to probably be putting routines up on high bar, maybe parallel bars as well. And in training, he looks like he's fine on those events, again, from the clips that I've seen. So particularly in qualification for Max, I think he'll probably do those events. But GB, I think, have the upper hand. Floor, massive difference. Now, if GB start on pommel with potentially America or even Ukraine, that means we're going to start on probably one of our strongest events. Definitely in terms of having the current Olympic champion, right? But I think Jake has looked very solid on pommels recently, very clean routine. And Joe as well. If Joe can hit that routine and go through well, Joe can get in the high 14s. I think that could be a really strong pommel horse team, one of the best, I think, of the whole competition. So starting on pommels and then finishing on floor and having the strongest team on floor, it worked in 2012, right? Again, had a strong pommels routine, a strong pommel team and a very strong floor team. I think the difference being that those 3 floor scores are big score, very difficult routines. So in terms of consistency, again, going back to those apparatus that have the most amount of deductions, floor is one of those apparatus where it's very easy to make mistakes. And as soon as you start stepping on every tumble, all of a sudden you're hitting an E-score that's in the 7s rather than being in the high 8s, and that really brings your score down. And that advantage you have on difficulty, it kind of, it's void. It doesn't become a differentiator between the teams. So, it's going to be interesting to see where GB start. But I think if GB start on pommel and they go through pommel, I think that's really going to put the pressure on America and particularly Ukraine as well. I think my prediction for top 3, I'm going to be biased, obviously, is actually looking at it now. I think that it's going to be Japan, China, and I think Great Britain might do it. I think they will. I think given the fact that they had such difficulties with the injuries and Max and people coming in late, having 2 youngsters on the team, very similar. You've got 2 19, 20-year-olds, very similar to the team makeup that we had in 2012, but with a bit more experience in terms of having Max. Max is in his 30s now. It's his 4th Olympic Games, and you've got Joe, who's very experienced, Jake again. I think that they might nick it. So I'm supporting the GB guys. I think that they might do it. I think that they might not have the highest difficulty, but I don't think that's played too much of a factor in the past. That's worked to our advantage, and I think the pressure will be potentially on the Americans and Ukraine. I do think that they benefit from that free to count, but I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure. I'm gonna back the GB guys. I think they can step up. So team final, I'm predicting Japan, China, and then GB for the bronze medal. In the all-around final, again, I think Hashimoto has the upper hand. I think internationally, his gymnastics is just really well loved by all of the other countries, and that does play a factor, right? At the end of the day, the judges are the people that decide who are going to win the Olympic gold medals. The athletes have to do their routines, but it's a subjective sport, and I think the style of his gymnastics is something that will play a factor if the top few guys all go clean. He's got big difficulty. Again, I think he'll probably start on floor, and he's going to finish on high bar, which is arguably his strongest event. He's going to be going for the gold on the high bar, so what a great place to finish. I think Bo Heng, the Chinese gymnast, is probably favourite for second. What shape he's in, not quite sure. Again, haven't seen too much of the Chinese in the build-up to this Olympic Games, but I think with his difficulty, his consistency, he's probably going to be the gymnast fighting for second, and then I think that third place is up for grabs. I think it's going to be a fight between quite a few gymnasts. I think Kovtun from Ukraine. I think a massive fan favourite is Carlos Yulo. Tends to not be the most consistent. Hasn't really had a big all-around result at major championships yet. So I think Kovtun, Yulo. You've then got Brody Malone, Frederick Richard, as he wants to be known by now, came out on top at the Olympic trials. So I think him and Brody Malone will be fighting it out for the top American spot. Great Britain, I think Jake will be up there, and Joe can be as well. But I think my top 3 predictions for the all-around, I can't see anybody beating Hashimoto. Just looks very consistent, beautiful gymnastics. As long as he's fully fit, I think he has the upper hand over the 6 apparatus. Probably the one area he's going to be weaker on will be rings. I think Chinese gymnasts will have the upper hand on rings, but I expect him to be coming out on top. And I think that third spot, I actually think if Ukraine potentially miss out on that team bronze medal, then quite often the all-arounder can come back and really go for it and feel like he's got the weight of his country on his shoulders, especially going into this Olympic Games with the politics that's going on between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. I think the people watching, in terms of the neutral fans, from a public standpoint, and judges, there'll be a lot of sentiment for the Ukrainian team at this Olympic Games. I think that will play a factor, and I think, I'm going to put Kovtun in for third, so I think it's going to be Hashimoto, Bo Heng, a Chinese gymnast, and then third, I think, Kovtun. So that's my top 3 in the all-around. But the all-around, look, there's 24 gymnasts. In the past, you've had gymnasts that have come out of nowhere. Benoit Caranobe in 2008, right? no way near one of the favourites. In fact, he was a reserve for the all-around final, didn't even qualify, came in last minute and then managed to win a bronze medal, which I think was the first French all-around medal in about 100 years, which was just an incredible story. So yeah, I think that you never know. You could see somebody come out of nowhere, have an amazing day. If those top guys all start to have a few mistakes, and there could be someone that you're not quite expecting that's maybe qualified as a specialist, but can compete on 6 apparatus in the qualification, come out and really do something. So yeah, that's my top 3 prediction. And then when I go to the apparatus finals, I think floor, top 3. I watched an amazing video this morning from Henry Brooker, British gymnast. He basically put his top 3 predictions for the apparatus finals up. I used that as some of my research for this episode. So shout out to Henry. It was a really great video. And again, Neutral Deductions, Kensley's put some great stuff out, some really good articles that I used as my research. I did that podcast episode on the apparatus World Cups. I think some of those guys are going to play a factor. I don't think it'll be as clear cut as the favourites winning. It never is. And, from qualification, there'll be some big names that miss out. That always happens. I think on floor, if I was going to put my top 3, I think you've got Artem from Israel. He's a current Olympic champion, right? Luke Whitehouse, for sure. He got the upper hand on him and he beat him at the European Championships. So current European champion just a few months before the Olympic Games. He's got to be one of the favourites. That routine looks quite consistent for him now. And the training clips I'm seeing, he looks pretty consistent. That triple back, it's crazy that you can say that a triple back looks really consistent and looks quite easy for him, but it looks very solid. And it looks like a lot of those tumbles now in his routine when I'm watching, I'm fairly confident as I'm watching him that he's going to get 3 or 4 sticks in that routine, which is amazing. It shows you just the level he's got to with that routine. And so I think Artem, Luke Whitehouse, and then probably Carlos Yulo. Again, if he misses out on that all-around spot, I think he'll be the floor final will be his big chance to get a medal. I know he's great on lots of the other events as well, but I think floor, in particular, his technique is just incredible. His routine's beautiful. That would be the apparatus I'd like to see him get a medal on. So I'm going to go for my top 3. I think maybe Carlos Yulo might take it. I think Luke Whitehouse second, which is a big shout. I mean, what a story that would be. And I think for third place, I'm going to go for Artem. I think Jake's going to be in and amongst it. I would expect 2 British guys to be in the floor final, which would be amazing. That's happened before. So Rio 2016, we had Max Whitlock, who went on to win. And then we had Christian Thomas in the floor final as well. So that has happened before. It just shows you how strong we are on that apparatus. We've obviously got Harry, who's a brilliant floor worker as well. I'm not sure what physical condition Harry's going to be in. But I would expect 2 of the GB guys to be in there. But I think Luke, out of the 3 GB guys that are all very strong on floor, has to be the favourite, given that he's become the European champion just a few months ago. Pommel horse is going to be a very exciting one, right? Looking at Max's routines recently, and him, you cannot, but I don't think you can bet against a double Olympic champion on pommel horse, right? He basically just has to get to the start line, and then if he's in shape, he's done enough routines, he's feeling confident. If he can get through that and just qualify, I think then that puts the pressure on everybody else. One thing that was really interesting from watching the clips of Max in training was that they were wearing one of the new leotards, and he was wearing, so it's kind of red in the top section, then the mid section is white, and then he was wearing white longs and white socks. I think the only criticism, if you were to split pommel horse into 3 things, 3 areas, so if you're going to have difficulty, execution, and consistency. In terms of difficulty, best in the world, Max, right? Consistency, again, best in the world. If you're going to bet your house on anybody to do a pommel routine, you'd pick Max. And the only kind of area that people have any criticism normally with Max and his pommel is his execution and essentially his body line. So he doesn't swing the straightest in comparison to some of the other gymnasts. But with him wearing that leotard that had a white midsection and then flowed straight into the white longs and white socks, I felt that his circle shape actually looked a lot straighter. So that's something that I've never really thought of before. And actually, that might make a big difference. If you wear, let's say, a white leotard with blue longs, and you typically have a piked circle shape, that split of 2 colours in the 2 halves of your body is going to accentuate that a little bit. So I think it'd be quite a smart thing for Max to potentially wear a full colour in terms of his kit. So if he's wearing a blue on top, blue longs, blue socks. If he's wearing white on top, white the whole way through. I've never thought of that before, but actually I think that is something that maybe might play and all it takes for Max is for his circle shape to just to look a little bit straighter, and the judges aren't taking those small deductions, and he has the upper hand in terms of difficulty. What difficulty Reece is going to do, I don't know. In terms of Reece's training, he's doing an amazing job at the moment online of sharing his Olympic story, the build-up, the preparation. He's got a podcast. He's releasing YouTube videos every few days. So if there's anybody that wants to follow a gymnast that's preparing for an Olympic Games, or any athlete, he's doing one of the best jobs out there now of giving you a real insight into what it's like to be preparing for an Olympic Games and then to compete there. So credit for Reece for doing that, because that is not easy when you're trying to prepare for an Olympic Games. This is the biggest moment of your life, and he's taking the time to really document that journey. It's an amazing thing he's doing, and he's getting very, very good at editing those videos. They look very professional. So if you want, if you're looking for something to follow over the Games, definitely follow Reece's YouTube channel, and to be able to see someone that really is a contender for a gold medal do that is amazing. I think that's going to really play dividends and help him with his career after the Olympic Games. The fact that he's doing that, what an amazing thing to look back on as well. I wish I had done that when I was there in London competing. And I think the third place for me is going to be one of those specialists that qualified. So Kurbanov, the Kazakhstan gymnast on pommel horse, incredibly long lines, beautiful shape. So then the opposite a little bit to Max. Maybe the most well-balanced in those three key areas. So the difficulty, the execution, and the consistency, he was hitting all of those routines in the World Cup circuits. He doesn't seem to miss. There's not a lot of places that the judges can take deductions. He's got a beautiful line, and his difficulty is quite high. So I do expect one of those specialists, because particularly on pommel, it was so competitive to get that spot. I think it was almost harder to get that spot than to actually almost get to the Olympic Games and compete. So I think if he goes for his routine in that qualification, I think he could really challenge for a medal. So if I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, I think because Reece had a big mistake at the last Olympic Games, okay, and so he fell, that experience is going to really play a role. But I think when it comes down to it and you're under that extreme pressure, right, and it depends on the order a little bit, potentially because he doesn't have an Olympic medal to back him up, he's not got one already. This is his first time trying to get an Olympic medal. That might play a factor, I think. And I think because I think that will be the same case for Max. Because Max has got 2 Olympic golds and a bronze on pommel horse and almost has nothing to lose, and also at the same time he's already got his Olympic golds, I think that will play a factor. So I'm potentially predicting a bit of a surprise here. I think Kurbanov could come out and shock those 2 guys and take the gold medal. Looking at his D score, how consistent is his execution. So I'm going to go for Kurbanov gold. I'm going to go for Reece silver. I'm going to go for Max bronze. Personally, I want Max to do it. I want him to become the first triple Olympic champion on pommel. I think Max is already on his way to a knighthood. As soon as he announces his retirement, he's going to be in the New Year's honours list. The greatest gymnast that Great Britain has ever produced, and he will go down as one of the greatest British Olympians of all time, without a doubt. But I just think, given the preparation and the lack of preparation because of the injuries, I think those routines that he did earlier in the year will carry him through, but I'm not sure he's going to have had enough time and been able to do as many routines as he would have liked to going into that competition, and maybe in the end just getting through the routine, hitting his difficulty. I think, considering where he probably was 6 weeks ago, if you look at the competitions he's done where he struggled and had multiple falls and been scoring in the 10s and the 11s and the 12s, I think at the end of the Games, looking back, he's certainly going to go for it on the day, right? He's got nothing, and again, he's got nothing to lose. So, but I think he'd look back and go, wow, to start with an Olympic bronze medal on pommel and to finish with one and have 2 golds in the middle, I'd take that, given that 6 weeks ago, maybe my Olympic journey was... Olympic story was going to be in doubt. So yeah, one thing as well you got to say is the pressure on Max. His face is on everything. When I walk into Audi, he's on every NatWest advert. He really is, again, the face of the Olympic Games. That's a big pressure. That's a real big pressure. So, there's only a certain amount of people that can carry that. I don't think I would be able to carry that pressure. And he's done that now for the past 3 Olympic Games. So, yeah, I think that's huge. That will probably play dividends. And I'm so excited for pommels. It's going to be an amazing final to watch. It's going to be so good. Probably one of the best finals, which is surprising to say about pommel, right? Because it's not typically the most exciting event, but it's so competitive. So those are my 3 picks for pommels. I think on rings, pretty straightforward. I think Yang, the Chinese gymnast, he's going to be the top contender. I think Petronas is up there again, which is amazing to see him. The only area for me for Petronas is potentially sometimes his body shape and his planche and his Maltese isn't quite as perfect as a Chinese gymnast, so his positions just aren't as perfect. He certainly holds them and he stops in the right place and there's no movement, but it's just not as perfect compared to the Chinese. And that dismount in the air, there are just a few execution deductions with that dismount. He throws his head a little bit and his legs can be a bit loose, and it comes down to that stick. I think it always as well, when his coach stands in for that dismount, although it isn't technically a deduction, for me, if I'm a judge, that always makes me think, oh, I wonder why his coach has to stand in there. He's obviously a little bit nervous about that dismount. So yeah, for me, that, I think that just plays a small role in subconsciously what the judges are thinking in that routine. When you go out there and you compete on the rings and it's just you up there, it's pretty cool, right? Especially on rings. Rings is like the gymnastics event. So I'm going to give the Chinese gymnast the upper hand. Petronas, I think, is right in there in second. And then third is a difficult one for me. A lot of people are saying the French gymnast, Samir, who qualified through that individual spot, what a story that would be. Completely shattered his leg in Rio. I thought he was retired from gymnastics, even to the point that around autumn, Christmas time, I saw him in a TV advert for a car company. And I was like, oh, wow, he still does a little bit of gymnastics. Because I was genuinely convinced he was retired. And now he's qualified for an Olympic Games. So an incredible comeback story. And I'm sure the French TV channels and broadcast channels that will be following his story will make a big deal of that. And he does have beautiful positions. His swing elements seem to be sometimes a little bit shaky. And for me as a judge, if I was looking, I think there's a few deductions in there, and sometimes that can play a role in when you then come out of those swing elements and try and stop in strength, you can be moving. And I'm actually going to go for the Turkish gymnast, Adam Azil. I think he'll be up there in terms of the all-around. I'm not sure how Turkey are going to do. If Turkey qualify for the team final, I think that will be huge for them. They've got a strong team, but I think he's a solid all-rounder. He'll be up there again in that pocket of all-arounders from third, kind of almost the top 10. But I think he could come out and do very well on rings. So I'm going to actually go for him on rings, which is, at contrast to a lot of other people's predictions. I'm going to go to vault. I think Jake is the front runner. I think that's probably going into this Olympic Games, which is crazy to say this considering we've got Max on our team, but Jake is I think our best chance at a gold medal in the men's gymnastics. And on vault, I just can't see anybody beating him. I think the 2 vaults are so varied. He has a twisting vault, and all he kind of needs to do for that 3.5 is just put it onto his feet, even if he takes a nice step forward. It's straight down the middle. He keeps his legs together. It just looks effortless. It's incredible, that vault. And his second vault is Dragulescu, just gets better all the time. His legs are getting closer together. He's kicking it out. So I think Jake, for me, is the favourite to win the vault. Then it gets a little bit... There's a lot of guys that... they kind of have 2, 5, 6 vaults and they're very clean with them. So Davtan, the Armenian, and then you've got Harry Hepworth, the same. So those two will be very close, I think. You've got Carlos Yulo. You've got lots of gymnasts on vault, but I think for me, Radovilov, again, another great vaulter, I'm sure he'll be there. I think typically the fact that the rules in gymnastics have allowed for 2 handspring vaults means that those gymnasts that are doing maybe a handspring double front half turn, so a Dragulescu, and a handspring 2.5 twist, they're going to be able to come out early and spot the floor. So typically, they've got a better chance of sticking those vaults, whereas someone like Radovilov is doing a double pike souk. It's very rare you ever stick a double pike souk because it's a blind landing and you just have to time everything so perfectly that I would give them the upper hand. So I think Carlos Yulo, again, big difficulty. Tanagawa from Japan. My only concern with Tanagawa, I think he's got the difficulty right. He's going to do that pike Dragulescu, hopefully, and a triple twist. My worry is the fact that he injured his knee and broke his knee earlier in the year. So I just question his ability to have got through a 6-month prep on that bad knee, to have been able to do all of the routines it's going to take to compete in a qualification, potentially going to do all around, and then the team final where they definitely need him to do that pike Dragulescu. I'm just not sure whether he's got enough in the tank in his knee to be able to withstand that 6-month prep. So I'm going to go with Jake Jarman, the gold medal. I'm going to go with the silver medal to Artem, the Armenian. And I'm actually going to go with, I think we could have an opportunity to see two British guys on the medal podium. So I think Harry Hepworth, I think this is going to be the event where he really shines. You know, he had 3 apparatus finals at the World Championships last year, which was incredible as a 19-year-old. I think he's got enough experience. He's won gold medals almost on floor and vault at World Cups. I think that, and he sticks those vaults so often. I'm actually going to give it, I think we've got a chance. I think, again, like I said with the all-around, sometimes if you've got someone that's so far out in front and is the favourite, it kind of brings someone along with them. They kind of ride in their slipstream a little bit. And I think we could have Harry Hepworth for a bronze medal on floor. So, yeah, I mean, I'm predicting a lot of medals for GB, right? You can tell I'm biased. I think that's 4 already. But going into but I think, you know, and this probably, you know, my opinion when the team was selected was that it was a team selected for individual apparatus medals. Now, I don't think the team coaches would maybe agree with that. And I think, you know, I've heard that was kind of the response. A lot of the feedback after they picked the team was, they picked a team of individuals instead of a team that can challenge for a team medal. That was kind of pushed back on, I think, by the actual team there. But it kind of shows in my predictions that there are a lot of apparatus, particularly floor, pommel horse and vault, we've got real chances of medals. So if I move on to parallel bars, I think parallel bars is relatively clear-cut. I think you've got the Chinese gymnast Zhu. I can't see anybody beating him. Best in the world, unless he has a mistake. You know, he's probably the biggest favourite on any event to win. I think in second place, it's going to be a fight between Lukas Dauser from Germany, who is just so consistent on parallel bars. You know, you just expect him to do a clean routine. It's very rare he ever has any hand placements. He always seems to stick his dismount. And then Kovton's got the difficulty. I think on execution-wise, I'd give the upper hand to probably Dauser. So I'm going to go with Zhu, Dauser, and then Kovton. I think if the Americans had picked Curran, Phillips, he would have been up there with his huge difficulty and his consistency again. But I think, P-bars for me is the one that's most straightforward. I think it's going to probably be the tightest after the Chinese because it's the apparatus where there's, alongside vault, it's the least amount of deductions typically. So you can get the highest E-scores. So watch out for that. You're going to see scores, high 8s, maybe 9s on parallel bars. You're not going to see that on many other apparatus. On high bar is probably the other event with floor that is the most unpredictable. Floor, there's a lot of built-in deductions, lots of steps. You can go out of bounds. High bar, you can miss the bar, right? So I think high bar is going to be super exciting. It always is. Everybody seems to step it up. The level of high bar now around the world globally, it compared to where we were at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is huge. I think we went through a period after probably 2016 where just globally the level on high bar just seemed to take a real dip and a drop, and that's just come back round again, and it's incredible to see some of these high bar routines. The top 3 guys in the world, their difficulty is so high. So you've got Hashimoto, I think has to be the favourite. He's got to be the favourite on high bar. You've got Brody Malone from America, again, essentially doing a very similar routine to Hashimoto. And you've got Tang from Chinese Taipei, who does probably the most exciting routine. He's probably the most different looking in terms of his body shape. Of all of the apparatus finalists, I think, for a high bar worker, because he's so tall, but he's also big. He looks like a big guy. I'm sure I'd be interested to know what he weighs. A super big guy, does a very unique release in a Markov with an extra full twist. He's added a Casino into that routine. He can do a Luke in. So, going to be super exciting to see those guys. Those 3 are my picks, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a completely different 3 because high bar is so unpredictable. And when you go and compete on high bar in that qualification event, it very much depends on the tension of the high bar on the day. It can be different. You might do the podium session, and then there's 2 days in between that. And when they set the equipment back up, because they have to take it down, put it back up, the tension might be different. When you go onto the high bar, it might be a bit looser than it was the other day. It depends on what team is before you. You might have a team that like having the high bar really loose, and you like it tight. So the high bar can be very complicated with the setup. That's why you see the coaches rushing around to change the tension on those wires to get it just right for the gymnasts. And that becomes even more important for those specialists on high bar. So my prediction on high bar is Hashimoto gold. I think I'm going to go with Brody Malone silver and Tang for bronze, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a big upset on high bar. So they're my top 3 on all the events. going into the Olympic Games. This episode is going to come out next Monday, so qualification will have taken place and the team final will start on that day. So you'll be able to listen to this episode before the team final begins that evening, and we'll already know. I'm sure there'll be some of those big names I've spoke about will have potentially missed out. So we'll know who's qualified by that point. But they're my predictions for the Olympic Games this summer. I guess when I talk about my experience at an Olympic Games and what it's like, this is to give everybody an insight. And this is not so much about my story of the Olympic Games, but what it's like at an Olympic Games. So typically you have a holding camp that lasts for a week or 2 weeks. So all of the top teams in the world now will probably be in France for their holding camp. They'll be training at a gym that's been designated for them. They'll be on the equipment that they'll be using at the Olympic Games. France tends to be, all of the gyms in France are Gym Nova, which is the equipment for the Olympic Games, so there'll be no issues there. Their training will be, they'll be tapering down, so they'll be spending less hours in the gym. It'll be more focused work. They'll have days where they have to do their routines and they'll go around and prep a competition. They might have done that 2 or 3 times in the build-up, and there'll be now, if we're on the day, it's Monday when we're recording, the week of the opening ceremony, which will be Friday, they will maybe have 2 more routine days left in them before they go. So it really is the business end of things. They'll then move into the Olympic Village, potentially have a few sessions in the Olympic Village before the game starts, so they might be there for 4 or 5 days. I know that watching Reese's YouTube video over the weekend, he's in the Olympic Village now. So all of the teams will slowly start to arrive. They'll be getting used to what it's like to be in a village. When you arrive at an Olympic Village, first thing you get is your accreditation. Your accreditation it's basically a lanyard, it's a passport, it's got your picture on it. It says which areas of the Olympic Village and arenas and training facilities you're allowed in. If you lose that, you're screwed because you can't get anywhere. So that is basically your passport around the Olympic Games. When you get into the village, you first find your accommodation. It's typically like high-rise buildings and blocks of kind of flats that are built. Not sure what it's like for Paris. You kind of, in London, we had a whole kind of like floor section to ourselves. So the whole team was in one apartment block and we were in separate rooms, and you typically share with somebody else. So I was sharing with Max in London. I think one athlete could be by themselves. So I think me and Max shared, Dan Purvis and Christian shared, and Lewis was by himself. So that will probably be the case because it's five guys, right? So I can't imagine that they'll have enough separate rooms for 5 athletes. So you're probably sharing. Sometimes you share a block with athletes from different sports as well. So you might not just have gymnastics in your block. So that's cool because you can get to know the athletes from different sports. So when I competed at some of the Youth Olympic Games, I shared with different athletes. I've been in a room with boxers, trampolinists. That was quite cool. I enjoyed that. So you can get to know other athletes, and it takes the edge off. So you're not always talking about your sport. You can learn about theirs and hear about their experience. And typically, one of the sports will go out and compete earlier than the others, and you follow their results. And it's quite cool. It helps you take your mind off a little bit and ease the pressure. So you'll go to the Olympic Village, you'll get into your room. By this point, you've had all your kit. So the kitting out process starts a month before the Olympic Games. Probably one of the most exciting days in the process. You go and get you get so much kit. You normally get about 3 suitcases full of kit. What's incredible is, as the years pass, you end up giving out so much of this kit to people and swapping shirts. That now, because I went to the Olympic Games when I was 19, none of the kit fits me, and I have hardly any of it left because I've given away so much of it. My advice for any young athletes going to an Olympic Games or doing the future: ask for bigger sizes. Because you're going to grow, particularly if you're a gymnast, you're going to bulk out and get bigger as you get into your 20s. So if you're a small, go for a medium. If you're medium, go for a large. Because I'm gutted now that I can't wear much of that kit because it's just too small for me. So you've had your kitting out, you've got all your kit. Then you go to the dining room. The Olympic dining room is like the biggest dining room in the world. I think the one in London seated 5,000 people. It's food from all over the world. So they've got everything, every different type of cuisine. The one in London was like a big, massive U shape, and then you've just got long tables spread out the whole way through it. The really cool thing was that they had like big, almost like vending machines for drinks, but they were free. You just open the fridge and take a drink out. But it was like a triangle, and it was about 5 or 6 of these vending machines on each side of this triangle, and then they had people in the middle that were just constantly refilling them all day long because so many athletes were walking in and out and just taking a drink, which is just crazy. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of food and drink that's consumed at an Olympic Games. And obviously you've got all of the athletes all of the coaches, all of the volunteers, and I think there were up to 15,000 people in the Olympic Village for London, which is huge. It's like really is a mini town or a mini city for those 2 weeks. You've got everything in there, post office, you've got recreation areas, so pool tables and stuff like that, computers, libraries, everything, you name it, you've got it. Anything that you would need to live your normal life is there in the Olympic Village. It's a really cool place. You see every different type of human being there is. You see not tall gymnasts, you see tall volleyball players, you see small gymnasts, you see wide shot putters, you see big, strong weightlifters, you see everything. It's really cool. It's an amazing place to be. Swimmers with huge backs. It's like every type of human being there is possible is there at an Olympic Games. It's great. It'd be cool to line up every sport like in a line and like just watch. I've never seen a graphic of that. It'd be really cool. Maybe every Olympic champion in every sport lined up next to each other in high order and what body types they look like. That'd be a really cool graphic to see. Someone should definitely do that. And then you go to the training arenas. So the training arenas are typically next to the competition arena. They're normally not too far away. There's normally multiple, so there might be a few. So you might have different sessions at different arenas, and they'll have the same equipment that you'll be competing on. All of the equipment at the Olympic Games is typically brand new. So that's one thing that's quite hard. And you might not realise watching on TV is that the mats, when they've just been made and they're brand new for Olympic Games, they're quite hard. They've not been worn yet. So you'll know this yourselves. If you've done school PE lessons, typically using mats that are 10, 20 years old, they're quite soft and they're worn in and they're frayed and they're nice to land on, but these new ones are quite hard. So it takes a lot of repetition from a lot of the gymnasts, and it probably takes until the competition, until they get worn in a little bit. A lot of the equipment will come without any chalk on it, so the gymnasts will need to do that. That's quite difficult, particularly on parallel bars at the start. Some of the high bars might not have a lot of chalk on them. Every different country will use different chalk. They'll have different techniques for getting the apparatus ready, so you have to deal and contend with that. You might be on an apparatus with a different team. But China normally used to they'd have like a cloth with water on it and just take all the chalk off. So if you're after China, that would be quite stressful because you might want lots of chalk on it and you don't know what the grip's going to be like on the parallel bars. So that plays a factor. So all of the training gyms will be brand new kit. They'll be set out beautifully. They'll be spread out. Sometimes they can be quite cold. I imagine at Olympic Games they'll be air conditioned, so they'll probably be quite cold. That's one thing that I used to find quite hard. So actually, you might be in a hot country, but if the gyms are air conditioned, the gymnasts will probably keep quite warm, and same in an arena as well. You think a big arena, it's a huge space to heat up. That's why sometimes at Olympic Games it might be you might think, oh, I bet they're boiling, but actually you see them with big coats on. The Japanese are very famous for having their big, massive coats. We had some put together for the Olympic Games in London. I was one of I think me and Lewis wore them. Everybody else chose not to wear them. They were really cool. So they were a bit like what a boxer would wear to walk into the ring. And they were so wide, the sleeves, that I could wear my handguards in them, which was really cool. That's actually probably my favourite piece of kit and clothing that I had from London. So they'd be in the training gyms and then they'd be getting ready for the arena. And when you go to the arena, it depends on how close the venue is to the Olympic Village. For us in London, it was quite a drive. Sometimes it would take us over 30 minutes to get to the O2 Arena. And so you'd have quite a lot of time. You'd have that quiet time. And you typically sit on the bus maybe with headphones in and you'd be thinking about the competition, probably very nervous, maybe doing a bit of visualization. Your head will be doing that thing, that fight or flight thing. And you think, oh, why am I doing this? I'm so frightened. I'm so scared and nervous. Your heart's pounding. You're also excited. It's just a massive influx of all these different emotions. But that long journey to the arena can be quite tough. I think I prefer a short journey to the arena, so you've not got too much time to think about it and get nervous, and there's not too much of a build-up. I think depending on when you're going to be competing on the day will depend on when you're going to train. So if you're in the first subdivision, which I think there'll be 3 subdivisions, so that will be the split of a qualification. You'll have a group of countries competing in the first subdivision early in the morning, then midday, and then evening will determine when you're going to train in the day. So if you've got the short straw and you're maybe that early one, you're having to get up pretty early in the morning, maybe 6 in the morning. If you're in that late one, you're having to wait for the whole day before you get to go and actually do your training. That's a long time to try and control the nerves and channel that energy at the right times, conserve the right amount of energy. And I think the best subdivision to be in is probably that middle one. You don't want to be first, because then you've got to wait to see if you qualify, and you've got to watch all these gymnasts go. Typically, scores tend to get a bit higher as the competition goes on and the judges find their feet. You don't necessarily want to be last because you're so nervous waiting till the end of the day. So that middle subdivision 2, I think, would be my preference if I got to choose. You compete in the middle of the day, you can kind of wake up, be a bit relaxed in the morning, then get your competition done, and then sit back and relax and watch everybody else. In terms of, like, technically, you kind of want to go last, I guess, to know what everybody else has done, but it does put the pressure on you if you know what kind of scores you have to get. But it gives you the upper hand, I think, strategically going last in that subdivision. And then the competition will get started, and then before you know it, it's gone so fast. You wake up that morning, you're about to compete at the Olympic Games, and you'll get there, and all of a sudden you've done it, and you're like, wow, that was it. I can't even remember it. It was a blur. And then the competition starts to come thick and fast, and days go. And as the days go by, people start to leave the Olympic Village from different countries. And the people that are left in at the end are the people that are in the finals. And you start to support your teammates that are in different finals. It's just an incredible atmosphere to be part of. Like, what an experience to have had. Although I was 19, very naive, was very much not really processing what was going on, I still have some incredible memories of the Olympic Games. It was awesome, man. I just remember laughing and smiling all the time. We just had a laugh around the Olympic Village, I remember me, Max and Lewis went and got micro scooters, so we were scootering around everywhere all the time. I remember falling off it about 2 or 3 times. I think if the coaches had known, they would have gone crazy. But just an incredible experience, amazing memories. And I'm just very excited for all the athletes. They're going to have a great time. I'm excited to kind of follow the journey of people, follow on Instagram and social media. It wasn't so much of a big thing back then in 2012, Twitter was just kind of becoming a thing. Instagram was very new. Whereas now, this time, you're going to be able to keep up with all of the athletes. I'm looking forward to all of the topical things that come out. Following all the other sports as well, it's going to be super exciting. Just the Olympics is an amazing thing to watch. I think everybody you watch it and then you become fans of these sports you never thought you would be. Some new sports this time, right? Like breakdancing, BMX, freestyle, stuff like that's going to be cool to watch. It's going to be exciting to see some new sports, watch other sports, like I said, but the gymnastics is going to be so exciting, man. This is it. Once every 4 years, gymnastics gets a chance to showcase itself, and it really is the very best of all the athletes. If you made it to an Olympic Games, you're already in a very elite, special group of people. So the athletes that go on to win those medals, they really are the best of the best, and they deserve all the attention because of the hours that they put in. Gymnastics is a unique sport. It starts from a very young age, and these athletes are training 5-6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 20 years at times. So I'm excited to watch it. I watch it as a fan, and this time very much watch it and have not been part of the sport for a while. So completely watching it without any kind of, I had this conversation with Kelly that just came on the podcast. When you're either newly retired or still training and injured, it's hard to watch those competitions and enjoy them because you kind of dream of being there yourself. For me, this time, it's going to be great to almost watch it as a fan, an analyst, I guess a bit of a sports journalist. And one thing to look out for is that we're going to be doing lots of podcasts around the Olympic Games. So after all the men's events, we're going to have guests in and we're going to talk about the competition that took place the night before. So super exciting. I'm going to be announcing those guests in the coming week. So look out for those episodes. We're releasing content every few days for the first time, which is going to be great. This episode is going to come out on the Monday, like I said, before the team final. Super excited for that. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about today is the Simone Biles documentary that came out on Netflix. I enjoyed watching it. It was super interesting. I enjoyed, I think, the second episode more than the first. It was good to learn a lot of her story. I was thinking about this. I think Simone Biles has got to be the biggest icon in gymnastics since Nadia Comaneci. She is. She's one of the biggest names in the world, right? She's quite often called the GOAT. For me, the men's and women's is definitely separate. Like, we don't need to keep comparing each other. They're different sports. They compete separately. One thing that is interesting, though, that kind of is almost at loggerheads with that, was when I was watching the documentary, Simone Biles has 5 gymnastics skills named after her. And I have no idea why some of the skills in men's and women's gymnastics have the same name. So like a Kachev on high bar is a Kachev on A bars. But some of the skills that Simone has done in her career that are named after her have already been done by a male gymnast. And I'm not sure why they don't just have the same name. Really interesting. So if there's anybody listening to the podcast that knows the answer to that, why there are some skills that share the same name in men's and women's and some that have different, Simone Biles has done a triple-double on floor. That was done in men's gymnastics a long time ago, the Yurchenko double pike. Remember watching Christian Thomas do that at London 2012 Olympics. So yeah, I'd be interested to know why some of the skills get named after either the male or the female, and there's some skills that were done by female gymnasts first, particularly on A-bars, with a lot of the skills, a lot of the kachevs that come from like a stoop position. No male's done that, so I'd be interested to know if a male went to do that, would they get their name? So if anybody could tell me that was a big takeaway for me in terms of the skills. I think the big one is just like her story. I never really realised that she was adopted, had a real tough upbringing, grandparents raised her. Amazing story. Brilliant story for young aspiring athletes. I think that's quite a common one actually with in America and in American gymnastics. Quite a few of the athletes over the last few Olympic Games have been adopted, been fostered and raised by grandparents, or like I said, been adopted by willing people, like willing parents that wanted to adopt a child, and they've gone on to have big success. I don't know whether that's more common in America than it is in the UK. Typically, certainly in gymnastics, I can't think of anybody that, was adopted or was fostered. I might be wrong. So if anyone can, comment on the YouTube video of the episode, leave a comment even on Spotify or Apple or on social media, I'd love to know that. But it seems to be quite common in America. So yeah, I'd like to know from some of the American fan base whether that is a more common thing for kids to be fostered over in America, because it seems like quite a lot of American gymnasts have been adopted or fostered, which is really cool. And for them to be able to be given those opportunities, those kids, is amazing. So for her, what an amazing story, especially for other foster kids and kids that have been adopted. What a story. And she is, without doubt, the greatest of all time in women's gymnastics. Again, are you going to compare men and women to each other? I don't know. They're two different sports, right? The women do 4 apparatus, the men do 6. Even on vault, the vaults are higher or lower. On floor, the men don't, they don't do floor to music, the women do. So it's quite hard. I just don't think we should just be comparing men to women. They're two separate things. But she is the greatest female gymnast of all time. I would still argue at the moment that Kohei Uchimura is the greatest male gymnast of all time, but she's definitely, in terms of profile, what she's done for gymnastics is more than any gymnast in recent times. Definitely the highest profile athlete since Nadia Comaneci, and I think if I was going to put the 3 highest profile athletes in gymnastics of all time, it would be Simone Biles, Nadia Comaneci, and Olga Korbut. I still speak to people today of a generation, probably my parents' generation and older, that when you talk about gymnastics, they talk about Comaneci or Olga Korbut. I can't really think of people that aren't from a gymnastics background that talk about any of the champions in recent history like that. It's only really Simone Biles who's been the person that's really brought. So it'd be great if in the future a male gymnast could do that. It'd be incredible, if it could break through and become one of the biggest names in sport globally. But yeah, my big takeaways from that were the skill thing for sure. Obviously, there was a big deal made about the twisting issue that she had. I think one of the reasons that potentially, I think because they call it the twisties, it sounds quite comical. Having a mental block, I think sounds a bit more. I think because it was referred to as the twisties in 2021, there were a lot of people that jumped onto that and were like, oh, what does that even mean? I don't think it was explained what was going on. I think if it had been explained a little bit more to people, there wouldn't have been so much of a backlash. And it's a hard thing to explain. How do you explain that mental block? We've tried to do it a few times on the podcast. How do you explain to someone what it's like to not be able to do one of your skills when you want to do and getting lost in the air? It's absolutely terrifying and frightening. And when from a technical standpoint, they played the vault where she got lost at the Olympic Games in the documentary a few times. And for me, when she blocked off the top of the vault, a head went. And when you lose your head, it is like the most common feedback I give in my coaching in a gymnastics setting, when it's elite gymnastics, is head position. It's always head position, especially going backwards. When you're going back, if you lose your head, that's it. You're at risk of potentially getting lost in the air. And for me, she threw her head a little bit, she just got lost. And you could see those clips of her training in the gym afterwards. And sometimes it looked okay. Sometimes she would get just your confidence. If you're going up there, we had a similar situation in 2012 with Daniel Purvis. Dan Purvis was really struggling with some of his elements, particularly on floor doing the double Arabian. He kept doing a full in back out and getting lost. And there really was the solution at the time was actually, it's quite comical, but the head national coach told him to go out and get drunk over Christmas, which for me, I was like, well, as if that's what you're telling someone. But literally, that's what he was told, because he was too stressed, and just go out, relax, see your friends. And it kind of helped, but going into that European Championships, he was still struggling. In the warm-up, he was doing full turn and back out. He was ill then in that competition, but seemed to be able to pull it round for the Olympic Games, but he had to change his routine. That's why Dan Purvis didn't finish with a double Arabian at the Olympic Games. He finished with a handspring double front. And once you get that in your head, it's very hard to shake. And typically, it stays with you for the whole of your career. So she's done very well to get back. It was interesting to see her training when she was making her comeback, and she's still saying that she gets lost. I imagine if she's panicking and stressed about doing a Yurchenko with a twist vault, even though it's way more difficult and it's more dangerous to do the Yurchenko double pike that she now does, and credit to her, she's doing it on a lower vault, so she's got to block even higher. She has less room than the male gymnast doing that vault, so it's more impressive than the males doing the Yurchenko double pike. It's less scary if you have a twisting problem, because all you need to do is grab your legs and hold on. There's no twist involved. So I imagine one of the reasons why she's stuck with that Yurchenko double pike is that she's just too scared to risk doing the Yurchenko 2.5, even though it's a little safer, and she would only need to do that because of her difficulty and the difference between her and the next best gymnast. I think in an ideal world, she would probably want to draw upon that Yurchenko 2.5 at times, so she doesn't have to risk the double pike at every competition. But the fact that she doesn't have to twist and she just needs to hold on is probably one of the factors that played into why she's still pushing that vault. But yeah, incredible to see her doing that vault. Her floor, again, the triple double, the tumbles that she does. She definitely could compete with the men on floor and vault. She could compete with the men. She could challenge for finals, but she couldn't compete with the best men on vault and on floor, because the best guys are doing two different vaults from two different families, typically. She got Jake blocking and doing a twisting vault with 3.5 twists, and then blocking forwards and doing a double front vault. So if she was competing on the men's side, she'd have to do two kind of different vaults, and I don't think she'd have the difficulty to compete with the men. But she could be there in the final, and she could definitely take a medal if there were mistakes. And on floor, again, her tumbles are good enough to compete with the men. She'd have to learn how to do combinations, but given how good she is and how talented she is, she'd have no issues with that. But again, they're just two separate sports, and we don't need to, it's interesting to compete, isn't it? But I always go back to that interview with Serena Williams when she was asked whether she could beat Andy Murray. I think she was asked whether she could beat Andy Murray or beat the best men, and she was like, no, they beat me in straight sets in like less than an hour. Because they're just two completely different sports. So I always go back to that. But it was great to watch that documentary and learn more about her story. She's going to be big news, right, at the Olympic Games. Anything around Simone Biles is going to be huge. She'll be the face of the American team. She'll have a point to prove after the last Olympic Games, having to pull out. I'm sure you're going to hear from people like Piers Morgan again. It was really cool to see that Gareth Timmins, who had just been on the podcast, who released his book, and his book came out last week, so you can order that now. I've started reading it. It's awesome. But the whole of that book was built off the premise of Simone Biles' story from the last Olympic Games, which was really cool. So if you want to read about someone trying to talk about the mental side of sport and how your mindset isn't rigid, it's flexible and it can change over time, you can lose that confidence and get it back, and it can be trained, then I definitely recommend ordering Gareth's book. It's really brilliant. But yeah, that's the episode today. They were my big takeaways from the Simone Biles documentary. Definitely worth a watch if you're a gymnastics fan around the Olympic Games. For me, when I watched the Euros and the football, I wanted to take in all the content I could. I watched the overlap, I watched Stick to Football. I'm trying to do my own thing over the Olympic Games. It's really cool to see some of my teammates are going to be out there, part of broadcast. So you got Niall, Christian, You got Lewis, they're going to be out there working for BBC 5 Live, Discovery and Eurosport. I'm not sure who the team are for BBC, but it's great to see them getting some of the experts involved and some of the guys that have been on the podcast to share their story. I'm hoping that will help the experience of the public and also the gymnasts that are watching the sport this time around. And there's going to be that real technical analysis. I'd love to be part of it one day, hopefully next year in 4 years' time. If we keep plugging away on the podcast, we might be part of the Olympic Games. We can get ourselves out to LA, but we are going to be doing our own thing here. So stay tuned on the podcast. There's going to be loads of content coming out. We're having guests on, which is going to be really exciting. It's going to be more of a relaxed feel. We're going to talk about the competition the night before, talk about topical things, maybe the athletes' experiences of an Olympic Games. It's going to be dead fun. I'm really looking forward to that. And some different guests that have not been on before. And we're going to be recording their stories, hopefully, to share throughout the summer as well. We're looking for new sponsors all of the time. So if you are someone from the gymnastics community, you're a brand that like what we do, you enjoy the content, and you feel like it would be a great platform to share maybe your company, your brand, what it is that you're doing, the work you're doing within gymnastics, please reach out. We're always looking for new sponsors, for people to support the podcast so we can keep bringing you guys valuable content. We love it. It's amazing. It's one of my favourite parts of the week when I get to sit down and record this with Sam, and we work on trying to make it better and improve the experience. We're going to definitely do that after the summer. We'll have a little refresh and see what else we can do as we head into the autumn. We've just hit 75 episodes, which is really cool, a massive achievement. We're going to be closing in on that 100th episode, so a century, which again is going to be an awesome thing. We're going to plan something pretty special for that. So yeah, if anybody's interested in supporting and sponsoring the podcast, please reach out to us. You can reach out to me directly on social media and we'll get back to you. I've got lots of school events lined up for next year. I've just finished 14 school events in June and July. It's been incredible. I've loved it. Thank you to all of the schools that have had me in. The kids have been amazing. Most of those schools are wanting me to come back in next year. We've really tried to build upon the fact that the Paris Olympic Games is taking place this summer. A big push has been on female sport and trying to encourage girls to engage with sport early on so they understand the real positive physical and mental benefits of it, and that hopefully will stay with them for the rest of their life. So there's not so much of a big dropout when girls move up to secondary school, and we've focused on the mental side of things as well. So the mental health with young people, it's a big issue at the minute that people are trying to focus on. We've really focused on that. So we've done my mentoring program with a lot of year sixes this year, working on building self-confidence, overcoming obstacles, goal setting, and finding motivation. We've worked on a lot of those year six kids that are moving up to secondary school and some of the fears and apprehensions they've got about that. And those sessions have gone really well. They're super interactive. The schools seem to have really enjoyed them. So we're going to be bringing that back next year. We're going to hopefully use the Olympic Games this summer as a springboard again to start bringing gymnastics into as many schools as possible. So please get in touch with me over the summer. If you're a PE lead, a head teacher, you work at a school, if you've got a child that goes to a school and you do gymnastics, try and encourage the school to reach out to me or reach out to me directly, and I can send you all of that information. And then club visits as well. I'm wanting to do club visits again this summer. That's another thing that I can offer, going into clubs, talking about my Olympic experience, bringing my Olympic medal in, my Olympic torch, telling the kids all about my unique journey, how it took me to the Olympic Games, and also soon doing gymnastics coaching as well. You know, I have my coaching qualifications. I've really enjoyed this year working with the elite men at Notch Gymnastics Academy. I'd like to work with some different gym clubs, bring my expertise, my analysis to the sport and help the next generation. And that's one thing I want to do this summer. And as we progress moving forwards into the new school year, but also into the new gymnastics cycle as the rules change, that's one thing I'm keeping my eye on. So yes, if anybody would like to reach out, please reach out to me. But thank you for listening, everyone. Make sure you're subscribing on YouTube. YouTube's doing really well at the minute. We're hitting 1,000 views nearly every episode, which is amazing. We've got more subscribers for the first time in a long time. We've got more vlogs to come out, lots of episodes over the summer of the podcast, and we're going to continue to do that. Make sure you're subscribing on Spotify and Apple, particularly right now, because we're going to be releasing those new episodes every few days over the Olympic Games. Make sure you get them straight away so they're fresh and you can listen to them as soon as the competition's finished the night before. But yeah, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your support. Have a great summer and enjoy the Olympic Games.